Hello everyone, another Wednesday and another part of this beginner's guide to whiskey, part 4, and we move on to the largest area in Scotland, the Highlands. Not a lot of distilleries doing the rounds up there, most of them are kind of occupied in Speyside, but yes, huge area and quite a lot of different styles. So we're not going to mess around, we're going to get straight into this, and today I've chosen two quite contrasting styles. Here in this little glass we have some 2005 vintage Balblair, and here in this glass we have some 12-year-old GlenDronach. Both very different distilleries. We'll start with the Balblair first as it's the lightest. And because the Highlands is so big, you're going to get a variety of different styles, things like Glengoyne down in the south, which is very, very light, very, very easy drinking, wonderful distillery. Along with things like Fettercairn as well, if you move out towards the east side of... if you move out towards the east side of Scotland, you've got things like Fettercairn, which is again another kind of sweet, slightly smoky whiskey. Glengoyne, which is kind of really rich and really spicy, similar vein to the GlenDronach. Move over towards the west coast, you've got things like Oban. Not a lot of distilleries on the west side of Scotland, especially when you go far up like Oban. And that does a little bit of everything, it's why it's so good. And then all the way up top, we've got Brora, which is now shut down. Clynelish, which is essentially new Brora. Then we've got Old Pulteney and Wolfburn. Now, Old Pulteney used to be the highest mainland distillery in Scotland, but when Wolfburn released their first official whiskey, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, they are now the most northerly mainland Scottish distillery that produces whiskey. So you've got a load of different styles kicking around in there. But the first one we're going to start off is with Balblair. Now, Balblair is one of the oldest distilleries in all of Scotland. They're established in 1798. Super old. Only 22 years younger than the United States of America as a country. Quite an interesting fact. And what we have here is their 2005 vintage. Now, for anyone who's familiar with Balblair, they don't bottle in numbered sort of age statement ideals. Like most distilleries have a 10, a 12, a 15, an 18, etc. Balblair have vintages, but they're still aged whiskies. It just says 2005 on the front, so this is their 10-year-old. Their current lineup is this fella, 2005, a 1999, which I believe is a 16-year-old, 15-year-old, 17 years old, long day, sorry, a 17-year-old, and there's still some of the 1990 kicking around. Now, I think the second release is 25 years old, but the first release was 24 years old, and that is an astonishing whiskey. That's one of the best things I've ever come across in my entire life. So Balblair, old distillery, vintages, use mainly bourbon, but they do involve sherry in the older stuff too. This is all bourbon cask. 46%, natural colour, no filtration, very natural. And me and a few friends were at Balblair last year, and it's like walking into someone's house. It really is. It's not, they let you see everything, they let you touch everything. There's no kind of, oh no, don't touch this, it's too rare. Like, no, just do it, one. Really great crowd. Would recommend it. It's quite far up. It's near Editon, which is really north of Inverness, and again, sort of east and above Inverness. Lovely place, do recommend, very picturesque. But we'll get on with the whiskey. So it's a wonderful, natural kind of straw golden colour. What you expect from a 10-year-old old bourbon cask matured whiskey. It's very thick as well. It takes a long time to fall down the sides of the glass. Smell. Wonderful. Sort of hedonistic, spicy flavours, kind of creme brulee and custard. Maple syrup, cinnamon and nutmeg. You're getting a lot more tasting notes and smelling notes out of me today because I was at the Whisky Festival last week, and before that I was at a whisky training session and loads of other things, so a lot of whiskey. I've had to talk about it a lot. A little bit of fresh mint, a little bit of basil too, slightly herbaceous style. You do get that from Balblair's. Their 1999 is kind of bittersweet with herbs. But yeah, it's an old bourbon cask matured 10-year-old, so it's kind of sweet, it's a bit indulgent. There is a little bit of alcohol coming off the top of it, but at 46% it's going to be a little bit more intense than whiskies at 40% that are 10 years old. Let's give it a try. Mm. It's youthful and it's vibrant. There's a wonderful kind of really intense spice going on with it. I will retry it again because that's the first whiskey I've had today, so it might just be my tongue. But yeah, that's really kind of big, vibrant, sort of Indian curry house style spices. You know, like oregano and coriander, a little bit salty. Go again. Okay, there you go. It was just my tongue. The sweetness is coming out now. Those wonderful bourbon barrels. But still, that's like a subtle underpinning of this whiskey. It's not an over-the-top style. They had a 2003, which was out a couple of years ago, and I adored that thing. It was absolutely spectacular. It was really fresh and green apples. This is a little bit more kind of, you know, it's got a bit more robustness about it. Lovely, lovely, heady spice, bittersweet herbs. Quite a short finish, not over the top. There's no particularly intense spirit notes, which is quite interesting for a whiskey that is that spicy. About 10 years old. Very delicate finish, just kind of fades away into the background. Yeah. For a distillery that's in the middle of like perfectly green rolling hills, that's got some oomph to it. Yeah, bittersweet spiciness with an underpinning of sweetness. The Highlands, very different place. Have some water. I've actually remembered to bring water to these reviews now. Even though this is in my flat and my kitchen is just there, but I always seem to forget. Okay, so Balblair, lovely kind of rich, opulent nose, but then loads and loads of spice and coriander and sage and oregano. Interesting, herbaceous kind of light whiskey. So the more northern you go, because that is quite a northern style, the more spicy it gets, and the more salty it gets too. So things like Balblair and Clynelish and Oban to a degree, that's got no smoke in it. Clynelish and Oban have a little bit more smoke. But that reminds me of kind of like a diet Old Pulteney. If anyone's ever tried Old Pulteney 12, it's not a peat. I think it's like the lowest peated whiskey in Scotland. Like it's really, really low peat level, but it's salty because it's on a coastline, and it's just lovely. I love Old Pulteney 21. It's one of my favourite. It's actually my favourite standard 21-year-old. That reminds me of an Old Pulteney, and the nose and the taste very, very different. So interesting, very, very interesting. And now we get into this. GlenDronach 12, I have the bottle just there. I sadly threw the Balblair bottle away, but it comes in a really cool box. This is just quite simple, comes in a tube. And what can I tell you about GlenDronach? They used to be independently owned by a consortium of people, which is called Benriach and Co. And it was a gentleman called Billy Walker, who used to be involved with Bunnahabhain. And a couple of years ago he bought a Benriach from Pernod Ricard. And he bought it for not a lot of money at all, including all their warehouse stock. This was Benriach. And then after that, he bought GlenDronach and Glenglassaugh. And it became known as Benriach Co. Now in June or July of this year, it was official that Brown-Forman, the company that owned Jack Daniels, Woodford Reserve, Old Forester, loads and loads of other stuff, bought it for a lot of money, much more than what Billy paid for it. And a lot of people got a bit scared thinking things were going to change, but I honestly wouldn't worry about it. Every time Brown-Forman have taken over a company, and this is the first time in, I think it's, well, at least a decade since they've been involved with Scotch whisky. They used to have a little bit of involvement with Highland Park. Every time they take over a brand, they take it to the stratosphere. What it means is you'll be more familiar with things like GlenDronach and Benriach. They'll probably be available on more regular shelving rather than just specialist shops. Which some people would see as a downside, but I see as, you know, it gets people into these whiskies. As long as they're not charging like ridiculously low prices for them and they're charging the appropriate price, it's perfectly fine. But yes, we'll get into GlenDronach. So yeah, now owned by Brown-Forman. Billy Walker still has his job though, so he's still master distiller, so the taste should remain the same. Now, when he bought GlenDronach, they spent a stupid amount of millions of, I say stupid, a good amount of millions of pounds buying just sherry casks. They now do use a little bit of bourbon in their 8-year-old and a few other things. They've got like virgin oak finishes, they've got a couple of puncheon barrels. Excuse me. But it's mainly sherry. It's what it's known for. And when I first tried these, I kind of thought to myself, like, you look at the equivalent whiskies like Dalmore and Macallan, which are still, you know, Macallan's mainly all sherried and Dalmore is finished in sherry, quite a lot of it. These guys just take it to the next level. So this is 12 years old and it's matured in a combination of Oloroso sherry, which is the most sort of traditional sherry that you'll find on shop shelves and what whiskey distilleries use. But then it's finished in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, like the Glen Scotia was last week. And what this does is, it might take away any of those slightly drying, spicy elements from the barrels and just gives it a wonderfully sweet, chocolatey finish to it. It's another natural coloured whiskey. It is another non-chill filtered whiskey, and it's bottled at 43% at a minimum of 12 years old. So already, it's doing pretty well. And it's not very expensive either. I think the average price for a bottle of this is about 40 quid. The Balblair, I think, is a little bit more because they're a smaller distillery. When I say about 46-ish. But yeah, so wonderful kind of copper amber colour. Another very thick product too. Smell. Already. This is a very specific smelling note I get for this, but if anyone's ever been to Sainsbury's, which is a supermarket in the UK, they sell sort of like their own homemade shortbread chocolate chip cookies, and they're big kind of square cookies, and it smells like that. It's buttery and it's unctuous, and you know, you get those typical sherry cask notes like Christmas cake, raisins and sultanas, but this thing has just got something else going on with it. Again, it's buttery and it's milky, and there's loads of kind of, you just list off chocolate bars in your head. There's just loads of that going on. Milky Way bars and Maltesers and like chocolate digested biscuits and, you know, kind of sugary, slightly savoury malt. Great. Again, like the Balblair, the nose and the palate, two slightly different things. Really kind of juicy, succulent bourbon styles, rich, spicy, Spanish sherry styles. So the nose is where the sweetness is, and then the palate gives you this layer of kind of like saffron styled spice. It's not a lot of spice, and it's not particularly pungent spice, but it's just this kind of delicate layer before the sherry comes along after it. And it's not a sweet sherry feel. It's, you get the oak, you get that kind of dry, tannic, almost slightly acrid flavour, but in a pleasant way. Like, it's kind of like you're inside the barrel. And it gets kind of jammy, like kind of raspberry and strawberry, but like those really old school kind of British style jams. Like, you look at it, it's in like a sort of hexagonal pot with a little screw top, and it's got handwritten labels on it, and they're preserves. Like, it's just loads of raspberries smushed together in a glass with the seeds and the pips and all this kind of thing, all kind of in there. And then the finish, again, like the Balblair, slightly bittersweet, but it's more kind of like a tobacco bitterness. I'm a non-smoker, but when people have been kind of rolling tobacco sort of in and around me, it has that sweet, savoury element about it. So there you go. 2 whiskies from the same region, similar but different in a very interesting way. So to sum up the Highlands, you know, huge area, vast taste profile. So things like GlenDronach, which are hedonistic and kind of grandiose and really old school in the way they make whiskey. And Balblair, which even though it's an extremely old distillery, has a more modern feel to it. It's a very, very light yet robust flavour. Personal recommendations, if you do want to try some really good Highland whiskies, here's 2 of them. But 3 of the favourites of mine are Old Pulteney, Clynelish and Oban. Wonderful distilleries. Clynelish is like this hidden gem in Diageo's treasure trove. They do a standard 14-year-old. It is wonderful if you can find it. Again, it's like 45 quid. But scores. Balblair, decent whiskey, 7 out of 10. GlenDronach, 12, 8 out of 10. So 7 and an 8. Again, one of my favourite kind of standard bottles ever. Be interesting to see what happens with GlenDronach and Benriach and Glenglassaugh as the Brown-Forman ownership continues. Luckily, I know a few of the reps who work for them, so you know I can kind of nudge a couple of shoulders and hopefully hear a couple of things beforehand and give you all some good news. But yes, that was the Highlands. Very, very interesting style and variation in whiskey going through Scotland. And next week we'll be on to Speyside. Now, it's kind of difficult to pick what to use in Speyside because there's most of the distilleries in Scotland are in Speyside in a very small, cramped area. So I'm going to try and get, hopefully, a Benriach, so you can kind of see what else is going on in what was Benriach & Co. And I love Benriach, it's all great. And then I've got to get something a little bit different. So I'll be trying to track a sample down to something a little bit different for you all. But yes, that was the Highlands, part 4 of 7. Please do join me next week, and whatever you're doing, guys, have a great day. Thank you. Cheers.